Here we are with Jason Wu, Chief Strategy Officer with NGE. Jason, how are you doing today? How's your XLIVE?
I'm doing well. Yeah, it's been a great conference so far. I've learned a lot and got to connect with a lot of people.
I really appreciated our panel. I think you had a lot of really insightful stuff to share, man, and I'm just dying to know your background and kind of where you've been and where it comes from.
Yeah, so I actually have a finance background. Started my career in mergers and acquisitions back in the day, did that for about 10 years. Left to do some other kind of more humanitarian efforts, actually worked at the United Nations for a little bit. Long story short, found out that I was more entrepreneurial than anything else. Started a couple companies, sold those, and then after my last company, which was a software company, decided that I actually wanted to engage in an industry that I really, really enjoyed. And I've been watching esports and competitive gaming and competitive entertainment now probably for about 7 years prior to joining Next Generation Esports. It was one of those moments where I understood by just observing the ecosystem and the growth of the ecosystem that if I don't do anything else for the rest of my career, I'll be happy.
Absolutely. Look, I feel exactly the same way. When you talk about strategy, what's top of mind for you? So what are you thinking of?
Yeah, so I think from my perspective, from our perspective, because Next Generation Esports is a white label production company and we partner directly with publishers, we are an outsourced esports division of publishers, we see it through a very kind of different lens, or maybe similar with the rest of the ecosystem. We see that the IP holders, the publishers, are the gravitational pull for the entire industry. And as it goes, so does the rest of the industry. Strategically, though, we are paying attention to teams. We're paying attention to any sort of what I call second or third layer ecosystems, which include sponsors, endemic, non-endemic brands, all the way down through distribution channels. And what's interesting to me is that it is by far one of the most competitive spaces that I've ever been a part in. I've competed at different levels in M&A and software, but it's also the most cohesive, if that makes sense. Cohesive in the sense that this industry is growing together, and what actually is good for one publisher is actually good for others, even though they're competitive publishers. Or what's good for my competitor is actually good for me too, is that while we are not intentionally growing it together, we are in tandem and in parallel growing this industry. And I think that's fascinating to me because it really kind of points to the growth opportunities, number one. Number two, it also goes to a different level of cooperation that can exist in the space because there is such a large consumer audience base right now that is digital, that is consuming entertainment very different than I would, potentially you would. And how those chips fall right now or within the next 15 to 20 years, it still remains to be seen. And I think because of that, there are parts of our ecosystem that have gone in one direction or another and placed their bets on different parts of the ecosystem. But certainly I can speak for myself and I think for the community, the business community on this side, is that we all want to win because we actually think that this is a global phenomenon that will continue to kind of rise.
Absolutely. So now there's been talk about NGE getting into the publisher game and creating their own game. Can you give us some insight into that?
I don't know where you got those rumors from. No, actually, the reality for us is that we are opportunistic. We do not have a game that we are announcing. We're not doing any of those sort of things like that. The genesis story for Next Generation Esports was that because we recognize that publishers themselves, the IP holders, position themselves to create kind of competitive entertainment, we went out of our way to do almost the opposite of what our competitors were doing. Not that one is better or worse, is that we just actually saw the transactional opportunity there. And what we've done is we've actually decided to partner with publishers directly and not compete with them. So we're 100% white label. But because of that, we have kind of, I think, a unique perspective. We're able to see the horizon because we work with so many publishers. We're able to see the horizon from the consumer side, and we have a lot of consumer insights because we work with a lot of distribution partners, mostly Twitch. Obviously, everybody works with Twitch, really. But because that we're able to do that, we're able to kind of see different trends. And I think also too, I'm really kind of impressed with our team. We have hired professionals and folks that are not only endemic, but also very tapped into what's happening because they themselves are playing those games. And we can, without giving too much of our secret sauce away, we can formulate and we can forecast which games we believe. Now, of course, everything changes, right? You never really know until you know. But we have pretty good confidence when we take a look at what games will and won't work. And so, is that in our future? I don't know, maybe. But our core business is to support publishers as much as we can.
Yeah, I think it's clear that you were able to do that even with running the Rocket League Championship Series. That relationship with Psyonix as a newer developer and being there for them, I think is a testament to what you're saying with your abilities.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. I mean, I can't speak for our success because our success is contingent on NGE teammates. I mean, they do it. And working with Psyonix has been great. They're a great publisher. They have great ambitions, great aspirations. And it's also kind of important to note that, one of the litmus tests that I actually use when we're thinking about competitive content for a game, for any particular, any genre, doesn't matter, is does someone who doesn't play those games understand it? Can they watch it and say, okay, I get it? And so I actually use my mother to test those things. She's 75 years old. I put something in front of her and I say, hey, watch this for a second. Watch this game. Tell me what's happening. Now, Rocket League, Psyonix, I mean, they created a great game. It's cars playing soccer. It's more complex than that. I mean, with all the physics that they built into this game, really great engine. But she's able to understand it. So really the success of Rocket League as a professional sport is really their own. We just amplify it.
Absolutely. When I think about the Olympic Committee and the fight for esports to be, officially recognized, and a game that could fit, Rocket League jumps out to me.
Yeah.
If you were going to pick a game, what would you pick today?
That's a great question. I don't really know. I mean, I think it would have to be, at least for that first game, it would have to be a game like Rocket League. And again, I'm trying to be very careful here. We're publisher agnostic. But the realities are there's so many complexities to Rocket League. In-air passing, the separation between the amateur and the professional, or at least high-level skilled players, is very clear. The chasm is starting to increase more and more, and the physics behind it. And you can still understand it, right? And there are games, I'm not going to name those publishers, but there are games that it's more difficult to watch. My 75-year-old mother would watch that, and it would take her time. It would take me writing down most of what she should be looking for, and even still, she won't really pierce the surface.
Absolutely. Let's bring it back to talking about the agnostic publisher approach and your company recognizing that place to support these publishers, that they focus on making great games. And you're there to let us help you execute on your esports strategy. But that also sounds like a really special relationship to develop, right? To get a publisher to trust you with that and hand over the keys of their IP and their communities is very delicate. How do you pull that off? How do you even do that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it goes back to our core values as a company. We look 100% of the time to support the publisher and the publisher ambitions 100% of the time. We don't look, at least for ourselves, to amplify anything that we do. We look to provide and create genuine interaction with current players of their games, current audience members, and future ones. And we do that very carefully. We actually believe that it's a sacred challenge for us to protect and also increase the awareness for that particular game. Now, it doesn't mean that it's easy, right? Because a lot of times we will have very kind of ethereal philosophical discussions internally about what would be best for that community. And again, we're only one opinion, and so we try to actually get as many opinions in the room as possible, even with folks outside our office. But ultimately, at least my hope is that our clients, our publisher relationships, all realize, at least I think they do, is that we are there to make sure that we are their true partner. We're not there to take advantage of popularity. In fact, most of our publisher relationships, we have been through the roller coaster, ride with them, and we have engaged with them before many people wouldn't. In large part because we believe in their game. And that's the other thing I want to note is that most of our employees are gamers. We don't make that a mandate, but we certainly look for that as a core competency for executing the job. Because we can't teach passion. And so all of our employees, at some level or another, either play that game, love that game, or have enough hours viewed into that game to understand what the community is looking for. And ultimately, I think that's where our value sits.
Last question for you. What can we expect for NGE rolling in for the last part of the year? What's the next for you guys?
Yeah, so we've been pretty busy. We have been fortunate enough to work with some of the best publishers, and again, talking about this confluence of events of market adoption, distribution channels, easy access to these sort of things like that. So we're pretty busy. Some of the stuff I can't actually announce right now, largely because of our contractual agreements.
Can we expect publisher esports relationships like still that similar?
Yeah. And the good thing is publishers have always been supportive of esports, but I think more so. I think there has been enough success across the panel that allows for buy-in from the publisher level. I mean, just think about it, right? Publishers, their core competency is game making, it's engine building, it's entertainment, and so there are other things that aren't necessarily, and they do want to be, and of course, this big blanket statement. But I think more so recently, what we've seen is this upswing of this actually drives value to our game, to our brand, to our studio, to everything that we're trying to accomplish.
I hate to do it too, but I got to follow up to that.
Yeah.
I can't help it.
Yeah.
How often are you having to preach the gospel of esports to publishers? Like, how often do you find yourself going to newer publishers in the space that aren't quite ready for esports, but you're like, we got you. Yeah. We're going to handle this for you. Do you find yourselves doing that to really green publishers that aren't quite there yet, or are you waiting to see them progress and begin at the process a little bit more? Or are you trying to adopt esports into games that you think would be a good fit?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a little bit of everything. We spend most of our time listening to our publishers, or at least I hope we are. That's usually a litmus test for me and how well we're doing. Ultimately, we don't know the game better than the publisher. We don't know the game better than the community. We're entrusted to be a part of that and to provide insight, whatever value that might be. Education over the last probably year or so hasn't really had to been quite as intense. And I chalk that up 100% to the publisher's desire to increase its own awareness in varying degrees. I also think that that's just a testimony to the growth of this global industry, where 5 years ago, 10 years ago, this was kind of seen as a taboo and or trendy growth market. And it started to solidify. Where it ends up, I don't know. I really wish I'd had that crystal ball. I mean, we have some thoughts, but really, I think what's happening is that there has been enough barriers that have been broken, business, social, technological, that has shown me at least that publishers, even nascent publishers, even less evolved esports programs, have at least given a thought to it. And I can't say that was true 4 years ago, 3 years ago, even 2 years ago.